Every year on the 10th of November, a bell rings 29 times in a museum on the shores of Lake Superior, once for each man. It has rung every year since 1995. It will ring this November, and the people who gather to hear it do so because the mystery of why it rings has never been solved. Not in 50 years. Not by anyone. On the night of November 10th, 1975, the largest ship ever lost on the Great Lakes disappeared from a radar screen in 17 minutes. No mayday, no lifeboats, no survivors, not one body ever recovered. The lake was so cold that it kept every one of those 29 men. It has never given them back. The last thing anyone heard from that ship was 4 words: "We are holding our own." 17 minutes later, the ship was gone, and Lake Superior closed over it like it had never been there at all. That ship was the Edmund Fitzgerald, 729 feet of steel, 29 men, and a secret that went to the bottom with her. And here is what stopped me cold when I went through all of this. The 3 most serious investigations in 50 years have each come to a different conclusion about what happened in those 17 minutes. None of them agrees with the others. None of them can be proven. And the wreck itself, 530 feet down in freezing water, has never been able to settle the question. Stay with me, because this story does not end at the bottom of the lake. To understand what was lost that November night, you have to understand what the Edmund Fitzgerald actually was. Because she was not just a ship, she was, for 17 years, the biggest thing that had ever floated on the Great Lakes. When she slid into the water at River Rouge, Michigan in the summer of 1958, the crowd watching her launch was said to number more than 10,000 people. 729 feet of riveted steel, longer than 2 football fields laid end to end. They called her the pride of the American side, the mighty Fitz, the queen of the lakes. She was not built for passengers or tourists or honeymooners. She carried taconite, small gray pellets of processed iron ore, from the mines of Minnesota and Wisconsin down to the steel mills that were building post-war America. For 17 years, she set records. She hauled cargo. She worked. Her crew knew her the way they knew their own houses. Some of them had sailed on her for years. And here is the detail that I keep coming back to. On the afternoon of November 9th, 1975, her captain was a 63-year-old man named Ernest McSorley, 44 years on the water. A quiet, respected master who had told friends that this season might be his last before retirement. He loaded 26,000 tons of taconite at Superior, Wisconsin, and set out for a steel mill on the Detroit River. A routine run, the kind he had done hundreds of times before. He would never get there. Here is what you need to understand about Lake Superior in November, because this is the part that the shipping records never fully capture. Lake Superior is not a lake the way most people imagine a lake. It is 350 miles long. It holds 10% of the world's surface fresh water. It has cold black water hundreds of feet deep, and when November comes, it becomes one of the most dangerous stretches of water on the planet. The sailors have a name for the storms that come in that month. They call them the Witch of November. When a low-pressure system rolls up from the south and collides with Arctic air pouring down from Canada, the lake can throw waves the size of houses in water so cold that a man overboard has minutes, not hours, to live. The Fitzgerald had sailed through November storms before. So had her captain. McSorley had 44 years of experience with exactly this kind of weather. Hold on to that thought, because what happened next is the thing that investigators have never been able to fully explain. By the early hours of November 10th, the storm had arrived and was deepening. McSorley and the captain of a second ship nearby, the Arthur M. Anderson, both made the same decision. Swing north, hug the Canadian shore, use the land as shelter from the worst of the wind. Textbook, smart, the right call. But the storm was not cooperating. By early afternoon on November 10th, the Anderson was recording waves of 25 feet. Green water, solid walls of it, was rolling the full length of the Fitzgerald's deck. And then, somewhere in the early afternoon, something went wrong. At around 3:30, McSorley called the Anderson. His voice was calm. His words were not. He had a fence rail down. He had lost 2 vent covers. And the Fitzgerald had developed a list. She was leaning to one side. She was taking on water. He asked the Anderson to stay close and keep an eye on him. And here is where it gets strange. The Fitzgerald then lost her radar. Both sets, blind. In the middle of the worst storm in years, on a lake full of shoals and islands, the largest ship on the Great Lakes could no longer see where she was going. Think about what that means. In a storm throwing 30-foot waves at you, in darkness, with your ship leaning to one side and taking on water from somewhere you cannot locate, you are now navigating blind. McSorley called nearby vessels for help. The Anderson answered. For the next several hours, Captain Jesse Cooper and his mates on the Anderson guided the Fitzgerald towards safety by reading their own radar and relaying her position back to her mile by mile across 10 miles of black, stormy water. They were doing it one radio call at a time. It is one of the most quietly extraordinary acts of seamanship in the history of the Great Lakes, and it was almost enough. By late afternoon, McSorley said something that the men on the Anderson would never forget. He told them this was one of the worst seas he had ever been in. Let that land for a moment. A man with 44 years on the water, a man who had sailed Lake Superior in November storms his entire career, said it was one of the worst he had ever seen. Not the worst weather, one of the worst he had ever seen. That is a man who is worried. And still, there was reason to hope. The Fitzgerald was enormous and tough. Whitefish Bay and shelter were just a few hours ahead. On the radio, the talk between the two ships was steady and professional, almost reassuring. But the Fitzgerald was riding lower with every wave that crossed her deck. She was blind. She was taking on water from somewhere no one could see, and night was falling. By 7 o'clock that evening, a heavy snow squall swept across the lake. For a stretch of time, the Anderson could not see the Fitzgerald at all. Not through the blinding snow, not through the windows, not even on radar clearly. She existed now only as a faint shape on the screen a few miles ahead. At 7:10, the Anderson's first mate called the Fitzgerald one more time. He wanted to warn her about another ship in the area and check on her one last time. "How are you making out with your problems?" And Captain Ernest McSorley, 63 years old, 44 years on the water, 17 miles from safety, gave the last words anyone would ever hear from the Edmund Fitzgerald. "We are holding our own." The mate on the Anderson signed off. Normal routine. Two ships talking across a storm. The snow squall began to clear. The men on the Anderson's bridge waited for the Fitzgerald to reappear out of the white, the way she always had. She did not. Where there should have been a 700-foot ship lit up against the dark, there was nothing. No lights, no shape on the horizon. Captain Cooper went to his radar. The blip that had been the Edmund Fitzgerald was gone. He told himself it was the weather, a trick of the storm. He called the Fitzgerald on the radio. Nothing. He called again. Nothing. He began calling other ships, asking if anyone could see her, asking if anyone had heard from her. One by one, they answered the same way. No contact. In the space of 17 minutes, between "we are holding our own" and an empty radar screen, the Edmund Fitzgerald had gone to the bottom of Lake Superior. She did not break apart slowly on the surface. She did not have time to send a distress call. She did not launch a single lifeboat. 729 feet of steel, 26,000 tons of cargo, and 29 men were there one moment and gone the next. So fast that the ship 10 miles behind her never even saw the moment it happened. Captain Cooper of the Anderson was the one who raised the alarm. For a long stretch of that night, the authorities struggled to grasp that a ship the size of the Fitzgerald could simply be gone. There was little nearby to send, an aircraft, a buoy tender hours away. And so it was Cooper himself who, after finally reaching the shelter of Whitefish Bay, turned the Anderson around and sailed back out into the same storm that had just killed 29 men to search for survivors. Other ships joined him through the night. They found debris. Lifeboats, smashed and empty, twisted and torn, ripped from the ship as she went down. Life rafts, life jackets, oars, wreckage scattered across the heaving black water. Of the 29 men, they found no one. Not that night, not in the days that followed, not ever. And here is where the lake itself enters the story. Lake Superior is so cold that below a certain depth, the water never warms enough for a body to rise. The old sailors know this. They say it quietly, the way you say something that is both a fact and a sorrow. Superior never gives up her dead. All 29 men remain to this day with their ship. At the bottom of Lake Superior, 530 feet down, just 17 miles from where they would have been safe. The investigations began almost immediately. In a sense, they have never truly ended. And this is the part of the story that has kept people arguing for 50 years, because no one has ever been able to prove exactly what happened in those 17 minutes. The official conclusion of the Coast Guard was flooding through the cargo hatches. The heavy steel covers over the holds had not been fully clamped down, and wave after wave had poured in, unseen, until the Fitzgerald was too heavy to rise. She dove straight to the bottom, bow first, at full forward speed. The shipping community pushed back hard. Their theory was that she had scraped bottom near Caribou Island earlier in the afternoon, tearing open her hull below the waterline in a place the crew could never see or reach. The water coming in was invisible because it was below the surface. By the time she was heavy enough to feel it, it was already too late. And there is a third theory. the one that the old lake sailors talk about more than the others. The Three Sisters. 3 enormous rogue waves that sometimes stack on top of each other in the unique conditions of the Great Lakes, hitting a ship in rapid succession before she can recover. The first wave sweeps her deck. The second pushes her down further. The third buries her completely. Each theory fits some of the evidence. None of them fits all of it. And the wreck itself, 530 feet down in freezing water, has never been able to tell us the answer. What the wreck does tell us is this. When divers finally reached her, the lifeboats had not been launched. They had been destroyed, ripped from the ship by the force of whatever took her. No one had been given even a second to use them. The bow was sitting upright on the lake bed. The stern had capsized and torn away. A field of taconite was spilled across the mud between them. She had gone down so fast that the cargo was still in the hold when she hit bottom. In 1995, a remotely operated vehicle descended to the wreck and brought up something. The Edmund Fitzgerald's bronze bell. In its place on the hull, 530 feet down, they left a new bell, engraved with the names of all 29 men. The original bell now hangs in a museum at Whitefish Point, just 17 miles from where she went down. Every year, on November 10th, it is rung 29 times, once for each man. The ceremony has happened every year since 1995. It happened this year, it will happen next year. And in a church in Detroit, the one the sailors call the Maritime Sailors Cathedral, a bell still tolls for her crew on that same day every November. You may already know this story, even if you have never heard a single fact about it. Because a year after she sank, a songwriter named Gordon Lightfoot turned her loss into one of the most haunting ballads ever recorded in North America. The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Millions of people who have never seen Lake Superior, who could not tell you what taconite is, who have never heard the name Ernest McSorley, know the sound of that song, and every time they hear it, they are hearing the echo of 29 men who said they were holding their own and were gone 17 minutes later. The Edmund Fitzgerald sits on the bottom of Lake Superior right now. She has been there for 50 years. 530 feet down, in water so cold it has preserved her and everything in her. Her crew is with her. The lake is still there. The storms still come in November. The sailors still call them the Witch of November. And every year on the 10th of that month, a bell rings 29 times in a museum 17 miles from where she went down, and the lake keeps everything else. Superior never gives up her dead. And so the Fitzgerald and the 29 men who trusted her and the secret of those 17 minutes are still down there in the dark. In the same cold water they were in the moment Ernest McSorley said the last 4 words anyone ever heard from that ship. "We are holding our own." That is the Edmund Fitzgerald, the largest ship ever lost on the Great Lakes, gone in 17 minutes, 17 miles from safety, taking 29 men and the answer to what happened with her to the bottom of Lake Superior. If this is the kind of story you want to keep following, tell me in the comments which ship, which wreck, or which mystery I should take you to next. There are more of them out there than most people realize, and I am working my way through all of them.